Hello, my name's Sarah Lewtas. I'm a visual artist based in northwest Donegal, and I work primarily in sculptural installation. I've been working in that medium for several years, and gradually it's developed into a very inclusive um, work work practice. I started off with I had an interest in people's methods of um, preserving things or honoring things in um, different cultures. I travelled quite a lot, and in recent times, I had a solo exhibition called The Undertow that addressed passages in time and passages in history through trade. I was very interested in sea routes across the Atlantic between Norway and Scotland and Newfoundland. And I went on a couple of residencies. Um, and I was very taken by the power of the ocean and people's interface with it and the way that it could physically move things. I was staying in a house that was actually moved from one side of the island to the other side, as the owner wanted to move the fishing port to the Atlantic side of the island, the Lofoten Islands. And then I went to Newfoundland a few years later while I was working on my ideas for the Undertow. And I discovered that there they actually physically towed houses across the bay from one side to the other. So this led to me creating a trailing installation with houses and lots of different things, diverse things to do with people and their imprint. And I got a huge response to that installation. And I got to talk to a lot of people about the installation. And I realised that I could develop it further in a more socially engaged way. Yes, when I was studying at St Martin's in the 70s, that would have been shortly after Gilbert and George were students there. And it was a very exciting time. And the actual St Martin's itself was right in the centre of London, in Charing Cross Road. So I was very taken by what was happening around me, actually, more than what I was doing in college. One thing that really struck me was that the punk movement, the fashion department in St Martin's, really was the vanguard of the sort of high style punk that started to develop in the mid 70s. And I also, because I was a student at that time and had not very much to live on, although it was pretty cushy times compared to now, because I had a grant. But a lot of students were squatting, and so I moved into a squat in Brixton in South London, and we used debris or, building materials from derelict houses around us to fix the house that we were living in. And I learned a lot of practical skills there that I've applied to my artwork in later years. Um, when we first moved to Ireland, I had two small children, and we were very keen to do the whole, self-sufficiency lifestyle. And it was informed by skills that we had learnt from squatting.
Thing that drew you there?
There was no real connection to Dunlewy, but my partner was at Queen's University before I knew him, and he was studying architecture, and he had friends that he kept after that time. And one of his friends from Queen's suggested that we go to look at Donegal because we were previously looking in Scotland, because my partner's family, he had family connections in Scotland. And so we came to Donegal on holiday with a van, and we never went home. We just stayed because we had these friends of friends put us up. They just allowed us to stay at their place until the house that we now live in was up for sale for the princely sum of 10,000 punts. So between some money we had and family help, we bought that farm and we're still there. I think it's quite common for students when they finish doing an art degree to not actually make art. And that was certainly true for me. I made practical things for the house, and I made clothes for the children, things like that. And I did some drawing. And yeah, gradually I got into making work, and it started off as very small. There was often a container, like a small box or something, and I would make forms in these boxes, and I would do series of them. And then gradually I started to observe my surroundings, and a combination of, I suppose you would call it a resonance in the landscape and the history of places that I visited, um, connected to something in myself. And so I would find things that spoke to me, and I made a lot of work from found objects, or I would reuse things, which came, partly from the squatting aesthetic of making do with things, and also it was an economic thing because we didn't have a lot of money at that time. In fact, we still don't. But I wouldn't have the same relationship with my materials now that I did then, even though this project is recycling things. It's because it pleases me to use those things for this project, because they're very connected to people, and they're things that people have used, so they have a resonance. You were mentioning the Glebe Gallery, and when we'd been there for a few years, we met a family who were friends with Derek Hill, and a friend of theirs, Melita Dinero, started doing art classes. And our friend Teresa asked if we would come along because she was looking for numbers for Melita. And Melita was a very close friend of Derek Hill's. And so she and Derek decided to do this open submission art exhibition. And mostly it was just the people that Melita had been teaching at that time that started this thing that has now become a yearly occurrence. And but there were very few artists. I remember when my partner and I had an exhibition in a place in Dunfanaghy called the Workhouse, and it was the first exhibition that had been in the locality that was, an art exhibition rather than a commercial selling paintings, although there were, people could buy them, but nobody knew what an art exhibition was. They were asking, is it going to be an auction, or how does a so it's incredible now that there's such a huge art community where we live, and it's just gradually grown over the years. And there's some very good art administrators. We have 3 main galleries. There's a regional cultural centre in Letterkenny, and Jeremy Howard is the director there, and he's been very, very supportive of me in recent years. There's the Glebe Gallery that continues with Adrian Kelly, and that has some really interesting exhibitions going on there. And then there's Anne Gallery, which is a local gallery in Gweedore, which is run by Una Campbell, and Anna McLaughlin is the maid of all work there, and she's very proactive. And that place has always supported me. It feels like going home. I can go and do things there, and they always support what I'm doing. And then finally, there is ArtLink in Fort Dunree, who have been incredibly influential in my art career. In fact, it was through them that I went on a residency to Newfoundland. And they've been very supportive in this project, the Cadiz project. I started off by having letterboxes in different venues, and the letterbox at Fort Dunree has been just stuffed with letters because they're so proactive. It takes quite a lot of minding, you know, to get people to write. And over the years, I've been making things that are to do with wrapping and preserving things, and I wasn't particularly choosing to do those things. Just sometimes I did them. And when I was traveling, I was particularly struck when I was in Central America years ago. I was in Guatemala and in Quetzaltenango, which is the capital, and there's this incredible cathedral there, La Merced. And outside there was this Indian woman with a huge basket of votive candles, and they were all handmade and different colours, and it stuck in my mind. There's certain images like that stick in my mind. And then I was very inspired by prayer stones. So it's all different places where I've travelled. This in Ladakh, I was in Ladakh 20 years ago, and there's these huge mounds of prayer stones just in the middle of nowhere. There's thousands of them, you know, in heaps, and there's something very primal about wanting to preserve things or wanting to make a statement that lasts. But they're quite sort of modest, these small things, but they're very human. And so this project is a sort of synthesis of those things, and also my desire just to communicate with people as an artist, and also just that simply contributing to something is enough. Like, I don't make any demands of what people give me, because I don't think it has any end at the moment. I'm just carrying on with it indefinitely. Um, and I'm sort of going through the color spectrum because, well, that's what I'm doing, because it's a way of ordering it, and it's very visually pleasing. So there's all sorts of fabric here. Some of it comes from, I have a daughter who used to do costume design, and she stopped doing that, and she was going to throw out this bag of, so that's where quite a lot of the sparkly bits come from. And you know, there's old socks and people's blouses and various things people have given me. You know, it's a very meditative process, and I'm inclined to do a certain amount in a week. You know, I will do so many At the moment, I'm doing the edge here, so it sort of builds up just mathematically, from 3 patches, and then there'll be a strip of 4 and 5 until eventually I get to 16 patches, which is the width of a strip, which I will then take along the whole edge. So it's because they're diamonds, it's always at an angle going from one side to the other. And I just work backwards and forwards across it. And yeah, there's something very pleasing about you don't really know what it's going to look like, until you get a volume of colour. And it's lovely to be just working with colour, because a lot of my work is quite monochrome. It's just shredded paper, which I soak, and then I turn it into pulp with a blender, and then I strain it and I press it by putting it on a towel on the ground, folding the towel over it and stamping on it. So it becomes quite like a piece of felt. And it's very strong, and I just press it into silicone molds, which I've made from some of them I've made clay models. There's a lot of goose egg. I've made a mold of a goose egg, which is I'm making quite a lot of those now, as part of the project that I'm doing with Liam Vibretti, because he was suggesting that people would like to put poems into some of these. So I've always been very interested in nature, I felt very close to nature, um, and I liked the way that caddis larvae gather things. I felt that was very parallel to me in some ways. They just gather debris or whatever is on the riverbed, and they make it into this case that they hide in. And I suppose this piece, I think of it as being quite protective as well. This patchwork particularly, it's sort of like a mantle. I am a gatherer, and I have times when I decide enough. And sometimes my way of dealing with having too much stuff in my studio is to turn it into a work. Or sometimes I just throw things out, because there's a point I found where keeping things and recording them it becomes very close to a kind of madness, and it reaches a point where it's quite unhealthy. So I now do this sort of cleaning every so often. Every year or two, I will go through my studio and I will just spring clean it. And I might regret throwing out some things, but they have to go. Uh, yes, this is a new experience for me, and it's very much, led by this project, and also my experience with my last exhibition at the Regional Cultural Centre in Letterkenny. I felt very supported. The people were so positive and enthusiastic about it and wanted to talk to me about it. And I realised, oh, I can do this. I can engage with people about my work, because up until then, I'd been very much that I made a work, and then I put it out there, and that's what people saw. But I was sort of doing this, that's it, that's what you you see. And so now I've moved into being more open and communicative about my work, which it's new for me, and I'm learning all the time to be better at doing it. Um, I find it quite hard, especially, when I start talking, I find it quite difficult. But then once I get into the zone, I can. And it's surprising how insightful people are. They have their own thoughts and insights about the work, and they're not always the people you think would be. The contributions have been incredible. Some people have really, really put their whole heart and soul into it. I feel very honoured, and almost, it almost seems a shame to encase them and hide them away, but at the same time, I feel they have a power, you know. This is a belief really in these things. I don't know, but I sort of imagine that as this installation grows and this pile gets bigger, it will become more powerful. I mean, you know, like cairns and things like that, they start off small and then they become something. It has its life, and I don't know how long its life is, but I think I'm going to be doing it for quite a long time. I feel very settled in it, and I actually feel that it's only just beginning. I feel it's built momentum now to actually carry itself. It was very hard to get started. It was very hard to get people to write things. People are quite reticent about writing. I'd been aware of it. You know, I'd seen some exhibitions that were here, and also I was aware that they did some work with ArtLink in Fort Dunree. There was an open submission that I think they curated that I put something into about 2 years ago. So yes, I've been aware of them. You know, because there was this call for this socially engaged project, I just thought, oh, that's exactly right for me. And it's been wonderful. It's a dream. I've been so supported by Eva especially. And yeah, it seems like a perfect thing. I can't quite get over it. It's great. Well, I do have. I am going to show this work as an exhibition in my local gallery. But beyond that, I'm looking for other places, and possibly I'll bring it into an exhibition with other work, because my work a lot of it connects. I sometimes think my work is a little bit like a Russian doll, you know, that one thing comes out of another, and um, this is where I've got to now. But I love, you know, if you have a nice, generously sized gallery space, I love the way when you put things in the space, they communicate with each other. And I love the dynamic between things in a space. Um, so that I find that very exciting. So.